Chris, I think you can share screen. Hey everyone, looks like we have a couple people filtering in. We'll give it a minute or two before we get started. All right, looks like we've got a quorum. So before we get started with demystifying due diligence, just a couple practical things. So I'm Josh Frankel with Logic Boost Labs. If you're not familiar with Logic Boost, we are a startup accelerator for early stage startups. Really, we're all a veteran of the startup space, and we really specialize in helping those early stage post MVP companies get to that $1 million number. Chris, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Got it. Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here. We're gonna get this started here. So, why am I paused? I apologize for that. Resume share. Oh, we're gonna do this again. Nothing like a little bit of technical fun at the start of a presentation. Stand by. Here we go. All right, thanks everyone for attending today. We have an hour, 57 minutes among ourselves now, so hopefully we can really get into the ins and outs of technical due diligence. A little bit about myself. My name is Chris Stazak. I'm the president and CTO of Logic Boost Labs. Been part of Logic Boost Labs since inception in 2019. I have 30 years of experience in all things startup, software engineering, software development related. So I've been doing this for quite a long time. So for the first 20 some odd years of my career, I was on the other side of the table where I was the person who had to step up and deliver on the request for technical due diligence. So I've definitely seen a lot of things over those years. Now that I'm on the other side of the table, I have the perspective of being the person actually instigating that due diligence and asking the questions and whatnot. So that's kind of the perspective that I'll be bringing here today as we walk through this. And as Josh said, we're Logic Boost Labs. Moment about us. We're a small VC shop that focuses on early stage B2B SaaS companies. And we're a little bit different. We don't just write checks. We actually roll up our sleeves and get in the trenches with our investments. And this is part of that first process for us in many ways as we start to ask this due diligence to get that investment started. A little housekeeping for today. So there's a Q&A tab that is part of Zoom here in the webinar. Please fire any or all questions you have into that. I'll be keeping an eye on that. Ask as we go if there's anything that you'd like me to drill into further or for clarity. If it's a big thing that maybe we'll talk about later on in the conversation, I'll state that. But please ask questions. We'll just go through this, try to make this as interactive as possible. And at the end, we'll have some links here for the resources we talk about during this presentation today. And I'm also going to walk through a sample technical due diligence deck to kind of give you a flavor of what that's all about. And that'll be available as well. One more point of calibration. So who's the audience for this particular set of information from today? Well, we're focused on early stage companies. So this will be pre-seed. This will be 2 founders in a garage plus maybe. that's going to be the sweet spot. Unsurprisingly, that's where Logic Boost Labs focus. So that's where we're putting our focus on today. If in the audience, if you're behind that in the curve, so maybe you're in an incubation, ideation stage, startup curious, this will show you what it looks like around the corner. If you're further along than this, so let's say you're into seed, series, slightly further on the food chain, then this will be a little lighter than maybe what you may experience as you were to undergo technical due diligence. And we may call some of those things out as we go through this. And this is oriented toward founders, and there's no real distinction here between technical or non-technical folks. I guess the thing I would say here is if you're on the technical side of the spectrum, then a lot of this will make good sense as we go through it. If you're non-technical, then what I'd offer is try to absorb what you can, obviously ask questions here, but most importantly, the takeaway I think will be to know these are things you need to have your technical people, whoever they may be aware of as you go down the path of technical due diligence. Also, let's talk about this whole due diligence thing in a broader sense. So there's a lot of flavors of due diligence. So we have legal due diligence, financial due diligence, and we have technical due diligence as well. And with all of these, we're kind of getting to the heart of the matter with these two big points, which is we want to validate the claims that are made. So you're a founder, you've got someone excited about the opportunity to invest in your startup, and you've told some big fish tales or anything in between. And now it's time in due diligence to validate those claims. So are your revenue numbers what you reflected to me? Is your technology what you reflected to me, et cetera? And then from the investor's perspective, we're taking all this into account and trying to understand what is the risk of this investment, because all investments have risk. And so we want to understand, where is when we go to put this money into this opportunity, what's at stake here? Where maybe the problems arise. So due diligence as a whole covers lots of areas. Here, we're going to talk about the technical side today. So risk is a spectrum. And so the investor is looking at the universe through pretty black and white. Like, is this the next FTX or is this going to be a unicorn? Where does this live in between? And every startup company lives somewhere on this spectrum. Quite obviously, you want to be trying to at least be in the middle to the right, toward the unicorn side, as opposed to being more toward the this is all smoke and mirrors and going to be a big problem for someone down the road. So investors are trying to calibrate with due diligence. Where does the risk, where is it at, and what's my tolerance, and align those appropriately. So early stage investors are super high risk. They're not risk averse, right? They're getting in early. They know there are definite unknown challenges to be faced. Later stage investors have a company that has a track record that they can rely on a bit more to understand certain categories of risk that have been closed out through time. The technical due diligence process, at least as I've seen and as I undertake it, really hits onto these 5 pillars of a startup. People are the most important. Do you have the right team to get the job done? That's just straight up the most important thing here. What are your processes? Do you have any processes at all? As an early stage company, the answer may be process. What's that? But we want to understand, how do you make decisions? How do things get done in your organization? Is there a roadmap, a vision? How is this all going to unfold over time? Or is it, very much just knee jerk? We live every day, day to day, and figure it out as we go. The operational side, so we'll talk about this a bit later. The operational side is probably the thing that most early stage startups are either deficient or almost devoid of in terms of, the question I'll often ask is, how do your customers know, how do you know if your customers are having a problem with your web app, let's say, your product? And, the answer shouldn't be, oh, they'll let me know, they'll send me an email or call me when there's a problem. Like, we need to get ahead of that. So that's the tip of the iceberg in terms of operational things. And then you may find it surprising, but the last thing on this list is technology, because at the end of the day, if we don't have all these other things in place, it doesn't matter what, technology is deployed, whether it's the most cutting edge thing or anything in between. We need to understand the technology, but it is not the leading part of understanding the technical due diligence in the full spectrum. So the bottom line here is this, is when you undergo this process, you are going to have gaps and deficiencies, period. The big companies do, the little companies certainly do as well. And this comes back to talking about risk. We want to understand whether, these gaps or deficiencies are problems, or are they things we can overcome, or, where do they live in our risk spectrum or appetite for that? So as an investor, what are we looking for here? We want to cross-check what we've heard. We have this great lead that, hey, there's this interesting opportunity. We understand it a bit. We like the business model. We like what they're trying to do. We've heard some stories. Let's go make sure what we've heard is what we see, right? That's a big part of this. So that's kind of the first test, right? Is we want to make sure that the first story we're being told matches what we're starting to see in actuality. We want to see that there's clarity of vision, that the team, the founders, however this may be, the small team, they actually, are on the same page and know where they're going. This comes back to the people side as well, this ability to execute. Like, do you have the right team? Because you could have the best idea and the best tech, but if you have glaring holes in your team and execution, then this is a problem. Coming back to the original opening here, where we talked about the target of this conversation being early stage startups, we want to make sure that what we see in this technical due diligence is life cycle appropriate, the maturity. So to your horror, you will probably hear me say things like, we will talk with companies that, maybe they're using Git, maybe their CI/CD is aspirational. We're not quite sure, there's no documentation for anything yet, right? I mean, folks have just been building and trying to make it go, eat, sleep, live this thing. And that's appropriate at a very early stage. If you're down the road in a series funding and it's that level, then that's a complete miss, right? Because there's an expectation that you have a different set of maturities at that point in time. And another thing, just like any good, journalist or investigator or what have you, we want people to, candor. We want it to be, tell us how it is, don't gloss it over. Don't tell us half truths. Let's just have an honest conversation of where it's at. And this is going back to the previous slide talking about, you're going to have gaps and deficiencies. So that's just how it is. And then of course, this is a little, not always the norm, but you're always keeping an eye for, in the due diligence side, of what are deal killers, right? So does someone build something that sounds like an awesome opportunity, but it's completely flawed in implementation? Like, it's just let's say, open security nightmare, or a privacy nightmare, or what have you, right? Just broken from inception. So we're trying to understand if there are things in here that, there's a security breach because just no secure coding practices have been employed throughout the entire building of this. And if we know that up front, that could be a deal killer for us, right? Unless that's something resolved. So we're keeping an eye on for those things as well. So with that as a backdrop of like all these, what's going on, what's technical due diligence, what are people looking for, investors, et cetera. Let's take a life and day into your life, right? And this is our lives as startup founders, right? Like this is living the dream as a startup founder. Everything's on fire. I barely can get all the things I need done on a good day. And now someone's going to come in and potentially, want to look under the hood, ask me a bunch of questions, and I need to get prepared for this. How do I do this, right? Like, again, I don't have time to do the things I have to do just to try to get my business off the ground. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how do we think about preparing for technical due diligence. I'll stop here and just prompt folks, like if there's any questions you have at this point, please submit them. And I'll hover here for a second and we can go get into this next part of this conversation. All right. So setting the stage. So you've done the right things. You have an investor who's interested, and conversations have evolved to the point where someone says, hey, we're going to get serious. We would like to perform some technical due diligence. We want to understand what you have here. And that's really cool. Like the first time you do that ever, or the first time for a startup that you're a part of that happens, that's a really good sign. It means that someone's willing to invest the time and energy and effort to understand what you have to another level of detail. It doesn't mean you're by any means winning, you're not ready, don't get ready to cash checks yet, but certainly it's a very positive sign when someone wants to come ask these questions of technical due diligence. So how does this usually occur? Well, investor is going to set you up with a meeting with whoever's going to conduct this technical due diligence. It could be someone from the investor's team. It could be someone that they hire out for this specific purpose, any number of things. But what you want to have is first and foremost an agenda. So when are we having this discussion? How long is this discussion? What are we planning to discuss here? What should I be prepared for, et cetera? I'll say that not having an agenda is probably a bit of a red flag. Like, hey, I just want to book some time and we're just going to talk. I mean, that could be okay, but you want to really be prepared for the type of questioning and inquiry that you may face. And I think it's incumbent upon folks that are conducting the due diligence to give you some hints toward that, right? Now you have a meeting scheduled. You hopefully know when it's happening, who it's with, et cetera. Now it's time to prepare for it, because I'm pretty sure for almost all early stage companies, certainly first time around, you're not prepared at all for it. And we're going to get into that quite a bit here. Really important for these discussions, whether it's one discussion that potentially kicks off a series of them. However, the format and interaction evolves with the technical due diligence, it's really important to make sure you have the right members of the team in the room so that you can make it as efficient as possible. So if you have two founders, a technical co-founder and a non-technical founder, both be in the room. And here's why. Your technical co-founder is hopefully doing most of the talking, but your other co-founder is there to back you up for things about the business or that lead outside of purely the technical realm, right? If you're lucky enough at this early stage to have maybe a software developer or two as part of the team, have them be part of this meeting. And now they may not say anything in this discussion potentially, but you really want to put yourself in a position where if you go into some specific area of detail, you're able to call on someone who can answer that to at least initial satisfaction. So don't skimp on who is part of this. I have a question that's just come in here, which is, if your team includes fractional team members, should they be part of the conversation? In general, I would say yes. And particularly, I would expand this also to contract development as well. So there's a lot of startups, non-technical founder, they contract out the development to something maybe offshore or wherever. Have those people and the right folks from their team part of that conversation for sure. I think there may be some extraordinary circumstance where that doesn't make sense. I'm struggling to think of one right now, quite honestly. So in general, have kind of all hands on deck. Your team isn't so large at this point that you're going to have this giant mismatch of how many people in a room, right? So have everyone available and have everyone on the same page, right? This is also a big thing. So make sure everyone's on the same page. And this goes back to the earlier points about the clarity of vision, right? So if we're having a conversation and we dig into some details of some subsystem with the one developer who's working on it, and all of a sudden I'm hearing this story about the business objective being Y when we've been talking about X the whole time, that's not going to compute. So make sure everyone's on the same page before going into this. And resolve any of those differences before this discussion as well, for sure. I've actually been in these discussions where I've had founders go into pitch heated argument triggered in the middle of these things, and that's not the place you want to be.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
We had another question here. I think it's a follow-up. It's basically, can I hire somebody to help me do this? So I think a lot of people are looking at this saying, I don't want to do this.
Totally. Yeah. So I think the simple answer is yes. I think the harder answer is that can be tricky, right? So the way to think through this is, if you have, I think there's two scenarios there. One is you've built the tech yourself, so you understand it well, but you're looking for someone with enough experience to kind of like a little bit like we're doing here to help guide you through the process and make sure you have everything in shipshape, right? So you absolutely, and there are folks out there who freelance consultant types and whatnot who have a depth of experience that can help you do this. And in fact, I would highly encourage that, because they can also be a really safe red team for whatever you're thinking of presenting or making available to present during a technical due diligence conversation, right? So that can absolutely be of benefit to rely on some outside folks like that. I think where it may get tricky is if you haven't built the tech in-house or you're not solid on what's going on there, and you're bringing in another set of eyes to actually be your part of your face in that technical due diligence discussion, then that may be tricky to have as part of that. So I'd give that second thought, but certainly for just looking for someone that can help you refine, critique, and perfect, to whatever extent that means, everything you're putting together for your technical due diligence, absolutely, that's a great thing to look for. I'll apologize for this once, no joke intended. Don't apologize. So I can't tell you how many times where I'm on a call where folks are like, "Oh, I'm so embarrassed. This is so messy," and I always say, "Stop. You've used your allocation of one. I apologize for this whole thing. Don't apologize anymore, because look, we just want to see what makes this go. We don't need to apologize anymore, right?" Like, and I think that's really helpful, because it plays into this being confident about who you are, because at the end of the day, you've built whatever you have here, your product, your service, what have you, you should be a domain expert there, right? And chances are you're a deeper expert, certainly in the tech and building of it, than whoever's going to be asking you questions, right? So, so while you may have things that you're, skeletons in your closets and other nasties and things, try your best to suppress the urge to constantly go, oh, I'm sorry, this is such a mess. Oh, this is so unorganized. Just let it be real. I think that's a good way to take it. And this is like the real self, ideal self thing is really important here. So, look, in the technical due diligence, we're done selling, right? Let's just say the prototypical CEO, they've sold the idea and vision to the investor. We're already at the next conversation. We don't need to reintroduce the sales pitch in this conversation. And this is where being on the same page with the folks sitting in the room on this is going to be really important. So if you're the technical co-founder, take your CEO aside and say, look, take your sales hat off. We're doing ones and zeros and all the accompanying things here for the next hours or subsequent meetings. And you're here just to support me through that, right? Someone in this discussion should be taking notes and detailed notes, because you're going to want to later understand in the blur, after the blur of it, what happened, what was asked. Someone who's taking notes is also the observer. What went well? What didn't go well? Where did we stumble on? Where did we have, problems? And that can be taken and made immediate feedback loop for a subsequent discussion. And because rarely you have one and only one discussion, either with a single investor or you're going to talk to multiple investors over time. Bottom line at the end of this is hard to say, or easy to say, hard to do. Relax. Like, see, folks are so nervous about this, and that's fair. You're putting yourself into this situation where you're, opening yourself to criticism. No one wants to be told their baby's ugly, and, all these types of things. And so you're a little nervous about this. The critique. How harshly will I be judged? Just relax, do your thing. It'll all work out. This is a flat. I send this when we do technical due diligence. I send out a couple page document that says, read this. This is what we're going to do. I need a slice of your time. We're going to have an initial conversation. I'm going to talk about these particular topics. And a little bit of it's baiting, right? A little bit of it is like, don't do it, don't do too much preparation. You're busy. Part of that, though, is my saying, I want to see what you have right now, right? So the truth is that most people are going to scramble to put something together or to further refine what they have, and that's okay. But I'm just trying to defuse this. I want to see it as it is. I don't want you to work to put some facade up that's not there. And I dig into, give them a list of things to think about in case, this is just coming from left field and they're just trying to calibrate, how do I respond and interact with this? So this is a real example of us doing that. Preparation. So the cool thing is you get that call, hey, we're going to do the technical due diligence. The bad thing is you're not prepared, almost assuredly, right? Certainly first time around. So the message is you do have, if this is in your future, start now. Your future self will thank you. And you're saying, well, how do I get 48 hours in a day and all the rest? I can't violate laws of physics here, but there are ways we can try to help relieve the distress of trying to put this together. We're going to talk about this a bit here. We're going to build a technical due diligence deck. I'm going to walk on the back end through kind of a quick drive-by of a sample one, and this is something you'll be able to get as a download after this as well. I'll say this because I can count on one hand the amount of people I've ever met that said, oh, I love to document things. So documentation is like eating your vegetables, right? So everyone knows you need to do it, but no one does it or likes it. And so what I would just suggest is in your normal course of activity, even not even necessarily thinking about technical due diligence per se as a focus, start to gain habits of documenting all the things that make your world work, right? So even if sometimes the best stuff here is almost like post-it note crib sheets. How do we deploy this? Where is this at? How do I get the credentials for this? All these things, like just start to collect all this. And then in time, when you need to actually pull together this technical due diligence deck, you're going to have a lot of raw material ready to go here. And then going back to the question that Josh asked about, getting someone to help you. Yeah, absolutely. If you have a trusted, friend, ally, resource, whatever that can, willing to do a favor for you and sit down and, constructively throw spears at what you're putting together for technical due diligence, absolutely take advantage of that for sure. And obviously, folks that have direct experience doing this, the better. But having someone in the room just to be outside of your inner circle of how do you do things, and just asking sometimes the simple but penetrating questions will help you put something together that has much greater clarity than, you're just heads down in the weeds. It's sometimes very hard to give a good context and perspective to, what makes your solution or product work. Things can go wrong in here, right? The biggest one I see is we go to have the discussion and it's clear there's just no coherency of thought has gone into this whatsoever. And that's really tough, right? Because, for myself, performing an evaluation, I just, I kind of have simple questions. I'm looking for simple answers. And if we're in minute 40 and I'm still trying to understand the basics of the basic moving parts of this thing, it's not helping, right? It's just not helpful. So not being organized, that's kind of a big no. Even if you have what you would find to, your self-critic of embarrassingly little kind of concrete things to share, at least have them organized a bit. That would be helpful. When we get into buzzword, my startup is a blockchain enabled AI, something. Now my, antennas go up, right? Because I want to understand, is this something that's riding a hype cycle train and under the hood is not what's being said, or is this really a deep practitioner, expertise in these areas, doing really good things, right? So definitely certain, kind of hype driven things will, for me, cause a lot of extra attention to come to bear. Preparedness, like it's like kind of showing up. This is like doing your term paper for in school, right? Like you can try to cram it the night before and it shows. So same thing with preparing. Be ready for any or all questions. If you tell me about your advanced system for orchestrating all these data ingests and flows, this and that, the other thing, and I start asking probing questions, be able to take those all the way. Like you can't just say, oh, well, magic happens and, look over here and let's move on. Like we need to go all the way if the door's opened. Here's an interesting one, which is you will get questions to which you do not know the answer. And in that situation, the right answer, or the only right answer is always, I don't know. Sometimes the answer is, I don't know, I'll have to get back to you. Sometimes it's, I just don't know. Hey, do you also have experience with XYZ tech? Nope, never played with it. In fact, I'm not even aware of it. That's totally fine. The trick with this, and I think any sensible person here, that's a total pass, no problem. The trick is you can't say, I don't know for things that matter, right? So how does your data ingest pipeline work when this error condition happens that, or something. You can't say, I don't know there, right? You have to be able to come up with some reasonable explanation for things. Another one too is, how does X work? 15 minutes later, we have not gotten there and you're telling me about why. We've not answered the simple question of how does X work? So answer the question. And this requires active listening. And this is sometimes where someone in the note-taking in the room, maybe they need to nudge someone and get them back on track. Okay, we have a question about the due diligence deck. We'll get into this question in more detail, but the simple answer is yes, it is something you will walk through with whoever is asking you questions. We'll get into that here.
Hey, Chris,
Yes.
we also had a question here. I think it was about gotchas and technology. There was a question about no code, low code for MVPs.
Yeah.
You know, are you setting yourself up for some of these problems?
Gotcha. Yeah. So, going back to the earlier here, we're talking about how the specific technology and use is almost the least concern, right? So this still rings true, here as well. But the caveat I'd give there is I'd be looking for one, that whoever's built this understands whatever limitations exist in those platforms. That we understand how we can have escape hatches if we need to do things that cannot be supported directly in those platforms. I'd like to also understand if we believe this business is going to scale outside of the capability of those platforms. What thought has been given toward, how do we migrate this capability outside of something that could be conceivably, highly constraining? So those are the types of things I'd give some thought there. So your technical due diligence deck. So if you do nothing else from this conversation today, do yourself a favor and have an overview diagram of your solution, your product, right? The moving parts of it. I would say if you're not familiar with diagramming tools, you should get familiar with them, but don't wait for that. Draw it on a piece of paper first, right? Like literally, if you draw something on a piece of paper and take a picture, you're already in a good place, or a better place, certainly. It can get fancier later. But I can't tell you how many times where you have this discussion with an early stage company and there's not even a basic, you are here among the 3, 5, 10 boxes that make the solution, comprise the solution at a high level. Because without this, the conversation is just very confused, muddled. There's not much context to rely on. I have to keep asking questions to calibrate. Well, where's this again? Et cetera, et cetera. Just get rid of that confusion, provide the context, have a diagram that describes the overall interactions of your system. Is it a system diagram? Sure. Is it, any other form of diagram, whatever you have, right? Sequence diagram that shows the basics of the business model, whatever it may be, have that as a starting point. You can evolve it forward. You're going to see in this deck, we're going to have a ton of placeholders. And the idea here is you have these placeholders. When you think of things you want to be able to share in due diligence, but you don't have the time or the details yet to put them in place, put a placeholder there. You'll come back and fill it in later. I think a key here is don't self-censor as you get into this, right? Just dump it all out there and refine it later. And then kind of following up on the question that was asked just a moment ago, you'd like to make this document something shareable. So when whoever's doing the evaluation, half the time they'll say, oh, that was an awesome deck. Do you mind sending that to me? So in that mind, don't put in that deck things that you don't want to leave your control, right? So, make sure it's, shareable in a trusted circle that way. But you may not want to put, the very intimate detail. For example, this is something where you may not want to put, specifics of, credentially type things, whatnot. Just, keep it at a high level. People ask me all the time about IP, like, well, I have, trade secrets. Well, algorithmic things, whatever. You don't have to put them in any revealing detail in here. You can use these slides as points of conversation, and you can calibrate conversation as you feel comfortable with. These will all be part of this sample deck at the end here, but it gives you a list of kind of the punch point items that we want to talk about. I guess I'll call out the left hand of this is kind of the, the how, the what, process, how it's built, et cetera, et cetera. The right side is all, for the most part, operational things, right? And these are the things that probably as an early stage startup are, as you start to go down that list, more and more kind of like vague. These are things I know I need to be aware of, or I need to solve them in some appropriate way, but we haven't gotten there yet. Talk a little bit about this, but I'll share a bit more from like an evaluator, like for myself, right? So when I'm going to go look at a company, I'm going to just do a ton of research. If there's something hanging on the public internet about the company, like I get folks that come like, how did you know that? Well, because I can look, if it's on the internet, I will look, right? I'm going to drive an agenda for the conversation because I have specific questions I want to get to, and based upon answers I hear, I'll steer the conversation in kind. I apologize up front, like you're going to hear the clickety clack of my keyboard. I'm taking tons of notes while we're doing this. And I'm really paying attention to, where are the gaps? Where are the issues? Are there inconsistencies? And just trying to piece this whole story together in my head and just understand the big picture, the broader picture of this. That's kind of what drives. And I'll dig into the details as I need to satisfaction, but this is kind of a high level framework of at least how I drive and look at the technical due diligence conversation. Let's see, as we kind of come to the end of this here. So by far and away, the folks whoever you interact with, who's going to be conducting the due diligence, they're going to be professionals, right? They're going to be just good people that are competent at what they do or beyond, and that's awesome. But I'm going to point out a handful of interesting characters, certainly that I have encountered over the years, for the purposes of, well, maybe making a little levity here, but also so that if you encounter this for some reason, you're not surprised, like, oh my gosh, what is going on here, right? The first bucket, and this is actually not too uncommon, is the generalist versus the specialist. So you're going to get someone who, let's say your tech stack is, let's say you're a Ruby on Rails tech stack or something like this, right? So you may get someone asking you lots of questions who just so happens, or maybe purposefully selected because they have deep expertise in that tech stack, in their career. So you're going to get, that's a specialist, and oh, by the way, they understand like the particular type of integrations that you do in your product or service or whatnot, right? So they're going to be able to just go to the floorboards in all types of detail there, right? The other side of this will be the generalist. So this is someone, this is going to be more like myself, who's seen many, 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 many things over the years and is going to ask, because not that they know some specific word or interesting thing about Ruby on Rails, but they're just going to ask kind of a insightful, deep, but open leading question about, how do you do this, right? And so you may very well, hit these two different types of personalities when you go through this. And these are good, right? These are good. The genius is an interesting one. So this is the person that they are going to let you know for the next 3 hours, they're the smartest person in the room, and they are going to just make you feel like you don't try their best and make you feel like you don't know anything that you're talking about. You're going to feel like full imposter syndrome attempt, right? And, these are things you just have to, kind of walk through, just go with the flow, try to steer the conversation, answer the questions and move on. You can't control who asks you who shows up. I've been in these where I feel like I'm under cross-examination. Well, you said this 5 minutes ago, looking at their notes. It's like, well, hold on, sure, but that was a generalization. Now we're getting into the detail. So sometimes it can be really, someone can be, very contentious this way. And again, you just have to kind of roll with it. I've been with this one too before, which is literally the most amazing checklist of questions asked in the most impassionate way with like really no concern about like, how does this work with the business objectives? Kind of leading questions that are open, kind of open response. It's literally like yes, no, this type of thing. And I'm sure it's the most amazing report on the other end, but it's a really unsatisfying experience to go through that. Then you get the wild card, right? Which is someone asks a favor. Hey, I have a buddy that knows about tech. I'm going to go have them ask a bunch of questions. And who knows, right? Like this may be someone who's never done this before. It could be a great experience. It could be just a terrible mismatch. You just don't know. But these things happen, not totally uncommon. And then, I'll close out with, maybe everyone's favorite, which is the person who's like, oh, you do it that way? No. There's only one right way to do that, and yours is all wrong. And I'm going to tell you all about that and just kind of just make you feel bad about what you've done the whole way. So there again, I think you just have to roll with the punches and just try to do your best, put a smile on your face, answer the questions, make sure, they leave with the best understanding possible, and you just have to hope for the best, right? So you go through all this whole thing here, technical due diligence. You can take a sigh of relief. You've gone through it. What happens? Well, you get a response back at some point. Someone says, hey, that went really well. That was great. We're now moving on to terms sheet or something. That's awesome. What I'll caution you though is, deals fall apart all the time. So just because you've made it to that next step doesn't mean you may not have to do another technical due diligence session with another investor down the road, right? You may get back, so keep on top of your game, I guess is what I'm saying. You may get a negative result back. Like, oh no, yeah, we didn't like it. There's too much risk here. Well, this is where, to the best of your ability, try to get the details. And not everyone's going to share them, right? Some people are just going to ignore the response for it. No, you didn't pass, sorry. Sometimes you'll get someone who will be polite enough to go, oh, I'll explain to you why this didn't work for me, right? Why this is what I saw in terms of risk or whatever the case may be. And take that as a learning lesson and incorporate that into your next technical due diligence sessions. And going back to eating your vegetables, like keep this documentation current. No matter how this goes, like congratulations, everything passes. Fast forward 6 weeks, here's a check in the mail, all that type of stuff. Like keep on top of it, because as you go through this process, the due diligence is just going to be more challenging as time goes on. So if you get behind, documentation is the root of all of this, all that drives this typically, then you just pay for it later. So, wow, that's a lot, right? And I hate to say it, break you the news, but like kind of this is the beginning. So if you're in the early stage startup, let's say you're trying to sell software, much like our portfolio companies, into like enterprise software solutions, guess what? Someone's going to say, hey, I need your SOC 2 certification. And you're going to go, what's a SOC 2, right? And that represents in part or whole, maybe like a culmination of what is needed for a very successful technical due diligence, right? So these are all just steps to get you to these points that you will need to be most likely over time. And with that, I'll just say, this is just the foundation, right? I mean, it gets, there's more and more as time goes on. It just gets deeper and deeper. So, with that, I'll wrap up and say, hey, here's some of the resources that we can share with you. This first link here is a template. I'm going to take the last minutes of this to walk through that briefly. There's a blog post that we have on this topic that you may find useful for reading. And if any of you are part of a startup that would like to talk to us more, Logic Boost Labs, you can go here to apply, talk to us. I'll pause there. Do you have anything, Josh, you want to interject before we go into the,
Yeah, I think just as a time check here, we're getting close to the top of the hour. So if anyone has any questions to kind of close this out before Chris, Chris does a really quick rundown of the sample deck. Please shoot those questions into the QA. We'll try to tackle those in the last couple of minutes here.
got it. So here's a sample deck. You'll see that it's going to be placeholders and aspirational throughout. The idea here is just to stimulate your thinking, give you a place to hang things on top of, and fill in the gaps as you go forward, right? Important on your deck, two things. One, always have a version. There's nothing worse than not knowing which version is which, and also you can look back historically to see what's going on. Two, the cool thing about a deck is you can have as many slides as you want, and we'll talk about that, but you can have as much backing material as you ever could hope to need, and you may not need to reference little, if any of it, but it's all there ready to go if needed, right? For those who are interested in downloads this, you'll be able to read this yourselves. But basically, just you want to dump everything into this as you go forward. So, here are links to my Git repos and my project management tools and my different deployed environments and all the things, my documentation. Just have it all here so it's one convenient point of reference that you can use and you're not stumbling through this as you have this conversation. So, hey, product overview. So here's the thing is someone's told a story to an investor that has them interested. The person doing the due diligence may not have heard that same line of thinking, right? So give them the benefit of kind of orienting them to, here's my 3-minute pitch of what the product is and does and who it's for and stuff. Just if that's needed. It may not be needed, but have it available for you. As an aside, this deck here also serves as a really awesome tool for when you onboard folks, because this is going to represent kind of a core of knowledge that what makes your product tick, right? So think of that as well. Quick overview of the tech stack. This is just, again, orientation, right? And here's some examples. You'll fill in the gaps of whatever it is for you, but just, I just want to calibrate what quadrant of the galaxy we're in. What cloud platform are you deployed on? What stack are you using? This just kind of helps me get my head around how to think about this. Here's that diagram, at least one diagram. Here's the picture of the basic moving parts for my solution, right? You can have multiple, but at least have one high level one. Let's dig into the team. Who's on the team? What do they bring to the table? You probably don't have a giant org chart at this early stage. So you could probably put smiling faces on here, personalize it, make it nice. These bullets are boring. You can make them nicer. Product roadmap. This is part of that vision, right? Here's the roadmap today. You know what? If you're using a tool project management tool that has this stuff roadmaps in here, link to it, right? You don't have to even write anything. Here's the link to my monday.com or my Jira or whatever it is, right? There, to the dashboards for it. So that makes life easy for you, right? How do you make things happen? Who's the decision maker? Who's the product owner? What is some of the machinery around just getting stuff done? May want to outline that, right? How do we actually, write code and get it where it needs to go? So let's go into this for a second. Maybe I don't have, actually, this is kind of a pretty indicative example of early stage company, right? Which is, hey, I've just discovered Docker. That's awesome. That's life-changing for me because before I don't want to think about how that went. But wow, I see the future of flying cars and CI/CD is coming, right? Like that's this is really useful to understand where you're coming from. So this is something where it's like, you may say to yourself, oh, I'm embarrassed that I don't have this. Don't, just lay it out what it is. I'll also say another thing, this future. So think about when you're investing, when you're asking investors for funds, what is that for? It's not just because you're looking for funds to get things done. You have a list of needs and wants. Sure, you have it in different areas, sales or marketing or whatever the case may be, but you have technical needs as well. Hey, look, we got to fix this or improve this to make our lives better down the road. So you have a built-in list sometimes with these, like this future bit here of future needs. Again, we can just go on, these are all, they're just all placeholders, right? Environments. Do you have more than one environment? You don't today? That's okay. List the one you have. Tell me that you want to do these others, right? And when they come into existence, note them. So I won't read all these through here, but hopefully this gives you a sense of the kinds of things that you can start to hang your specific details on and be able to fill in the gaps as you evolve, as you perfect this as time goes on.
Hey, Chris,
Yes.
hate to be the bad guy, but we're almost at time. Could you go back up and show all those links again?
I sure can.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So as we close out here, feel free to take a look at some of this extra reading, grab that template that Chris was just running through, contact us directly if you have any other questions. And then thank you for everybody for showing up today, asking those great questions. We appreciate it. And big things for Chris for dropping all these knowledge bombs on us today.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I appreciate everyone listening to me drone on for 58 minutes about this. Hopefully you got something good out of it. If you want to talk more with me personally, you can find me on LinkedIn. Happy to have a conversation. Again, thanks for spending an hour of your day with us, and hopefully you got something good out of it.